So this weekend I was on a river trip on the Delaware Water Gap National Recreation Area, and I came upon this log when we were looking for firewood. Now it grabbed my attention immediately because of the red center, and I recognized that as being cedar, and it has the familiar smell of cedar, which I absolutely love. Now I felt bad burning this thing, throwing it in the fire, so I decided to take it home and do something with it. First thing that came to my mind is round coasters. I think it's the perfect size for a cup of coffee, a bowl of soup, but I do see a lot of challenges here. So first of all, we have this hole here. We have a bunch of cracks in the side. We have some knots. This end obviously needs to get trimmed. There's some remnants of bugs making tunnels, some rots, some mold, a little bit of moss. So overall challenges all around. So I do a lot of handiwork. I've dabbled in woodworking a tiny bit. I figured this would be a good project for me to get a little deeper into it and take you along for the journey. I don't have a fancy workshop. As you can see, I have the garage behind me. It's closed because it's a mess inside. I do have a miter saw and a bunch of other tools which I'll be using. But overall, this is an experiment, and hopefully, if you're watching this video, it was a success. To start off, I think I'm going to sand this with 80 grit just to get, most of the dirt and kind of these rough areas out. Then I think I'll trim it about here on this side just to get this big knot out, and then on this end as well. And we'll go from there. So I was able to sand off a lot of the imperfections. Obviously, if you compare it to the piece I cut off, it looks significantly cleaner. Unfortunately, a lot of cracks remain. We still have a lot of pinholes from insects and stuff like that. But it doesn't need to be perfect. The whole idea is that this is just, sort of farm to table, woods to table kind of piece of woodwork, and I think the imperfections are okay and are actually going to give it some character. On to our next challenge. Obviously, this does not have a single straight line, so if I want to cut slices that are parallel to one another, I can't just put it down, because as I'm cutting more off, let's say I cut off this edge where it goes a little up, now the entire log is going to shift down a little bit. So what I'm going to do is hot glue it to the sacrificial piece of wood, and this is going to keep the cuts plumb and level as I feed it through the miter saw, and that should give me nice parallel cuts, and I'm hoping to get maybe 12 or so slices out of this thing. So I ran into my first problem. Unfortunately, the log with the sacrificial piece of wood is too high, and the blade, the retaining piece over here, is hitting it before the blade can fully cut through the sacrificial piece of wood. I think I'm gonna have to go with plan B, which is flipping this whole thing on its side and running it the other direction through the miter saw. So I think the perfect size for the coasters will be 3/4 of an inch thick. And in order to get uniform sizing, I'm gonna set this block exactly 3/4 of an inch from the blade and then secure it right here. And that's gonna give me uniform 3/4 inch slices. screwed one of these up and cut it too thin, but the other ones I think came out pretty nice, and it looks like we have a total of 3, 6, 9, 11, and that should give me 11 coasters. This last one, I'll have to measure it. I don't think, it looks like it's a little bit less than 3/4 of an inch, but I won't throw it out for now. So now all I have to do is just take off the tape, and it'll come off with the sacrificial piece of wood and the hot glue. I don't have to worry about trying to sand off any glue. So now I'm going to finish sand these with 120 and 220 grit. Obviously go around the edges where I rough sanded it. This blade does leave a 220 grit finish, or so they claim. However, it is a little bit rough, and I do want to sand it down to really get it perfect. Unfortunately, the cracks are all around and throughout the piece, but again, it doesn't have to be perfect. That's kind of the whole point of it. So while I was sanding, I discovered yet another problem. So more than half of these have 2 parallel cracks, or rather not even parallel, but they're intersecting, going like this and like this. And it's almost creating like a triangle. And it also doesn't help that there's a little bug tunnel here, and the piece actually wobbles a little bit. So what I'm gonna do is mix some of the sawdust from the sander with wood glue and try to patch these as best as possible. Let it dry a little bit and then sand them down, and hopefully that should hold for a little while. I let the glue dry overnight, and it was getting late already, so I'm gonna sand everything down now so it's all flush. Unfortunately, the color doesn't really match the actual wood, but who cares? I love the way that these stack up into one sort of uniform log, and I could just leave it like this and kind of throw them on a table, use them, put them back in any order, but I really want to maintain this natural shape that it came in. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to drill a hole all the way through and create a base that's going to have a metal rod sticking into it, which is this 3/8 inch steel rod I bought, and you'll be able to stack them up on the base. So the base itself is not going to be a coaster, the base itself is just going to have the rod sticking out of it, and then you'll be able to stack them all up and maintain this sort of beautiful uniform shape. And I think I'm going to make 2 sets, so 5 and 5. I did save the one slice that was still attached to that sacrificial piece of wood. It's not exactly 3/4 of an inch, it's actually a little bit sloped, so one end is 3/4, the other end is a little bit less, but I'm gonna make that the base, and this way I'll have 2 sort of uniform stacks which maintain their natural shape. And I think when they're stacked up on the table, it's gonna be, you know, almost like a conversation piece, an art piece on its own, but also it's going to be functional if you ever need to use it as a coaster. So what I'm going to do is measure the rod, cut it down so it's a little bit higher than each stack. Then I'm going to wash it. It comes with this like oily protective coating on it. Hit it with some spray paint. I got some hammered texture matte spray paint, and then drill 3/8 inch hole in each stack. Epoxy each rod into the base, and then stack them up and see how that looks. Alright, so I actually made it the same height as each stack, and this way when I'm attaching it to the base, I'm going to drill through the base, but not all the way. I'm going to leave maybe 1/8 of an inch at the bottom, so that way the base is flush at the bottom. And as a result, I'll have about 1/8 of an inch sticking out on top, which I think will be perfect. I also rounded off the edges a little bit so it doesn't snag on anything, doesn't cut anybody. So now I'm going to degrease these, wash them, and give them some paint. So while these are drying, I'm going to drill a hole through all of the coasters, down through the bottom one, and that's going to be the hole that's going to ride on the little rod that holds it in place. So I don't have a drill press, but I have the next best thing, which is this drill block from Milescraft, and basically what it lets you do is you attach it to the top of whatever piece you want to drill through, and it's got a little metal guide. It's got several guides, different sizes, and it actually has a 3/8 guide, which is exactly what I need. Now I might widen the hole a little bit after, so they slide easily on and off, but I'll start with 3/8, see how that goes. So I have to figure out where I want to drill the hole. I want to stay as far as possible away from any of the cracks, and I also don't want to drill it too close to any of the edges. Obviously it's not a straight up and down, there's curves and different shapes all around. So I think either here or here would be ideal. So I'm going to try that. And unfortunately, the drill bit I have is not going to go all the way through. So it goes around about this deep, which leaves me with the last two slices, last two coasters. So I'll just drill through this however deep I can go, remove the ones that are drilled, secure it again, and then keep drilling down. So that's pretty good. Now they don't slide very easily, and unfortunately the next size up from this 3/8 is a 1/2 inch, and I think 1/2 inch is going to be way too wide in this particular case, because I want the coasters, once they're on the base, I want them to all be exactly in their place, so the shape, you know, the natural sort of live edge shape all lines up perfectly. So what I'm going to do instead is use a Dremel to sort of sand the inside of the holes, widen them a little bit, and that should give us enough room for it to slide easier, yet not enough to sort of mess up the shape. So let's go ahead and do that. Yep, much better. Now I just got to repeat the whole process with the second stack. Beautiful. I need to glue these rods into the bases, but also make sure that I'm gluing them at the correct angle so that the whole thing isn't going to be lopsided one way or another. And I think what I'll do here is put some tape on the bottom piece and on the base. That way, if any epoxy leaks out, I'll be able to remove it along with the tape and glue it in, assemble the tower, let it dry, let it set, take it all apart, take off the tape, and I think we'll be ready for finishing. So let's talk about finishes. I did a bunch of Googling when thinking about this project, and it seems like the consensus is for cedar. Linseed oil is good. Again, I don't have a dog in the fight. The only finish that I've worked with before is polyurethane. So I knew the look I was going for, and I really just wanted some natural oil finish, which is going to provide some protection and bring out the natural beauty of the cedar. I looked for linseed oil in Home Depot. Unfortunately, I didn't find it. The only thing I found was Danish oil, and I looked online, and that seems to be fine as well. So I'm going to apply it, test it out, and hopefully it looks good. So after waiting 15 minutes, I applied another coat of Danish oil, waited another 15 minutes, then cleaned everything off with a rag, as per the instructions on the can. And I think we're ready for our final reveal. just some final thoughts about the project before I wrap up this video. So overall, I'm very happy how these came out. Given the material I was working with, I mean, I don't know if I could have done a better job or if somebody could have done a better job. There are a few sort of bloopers that are worth mentioning, things that bother me slightly. However, as I said from the very beginning, you know, this is more of a exercise and experience, and there's really no sort of right or wrong answer. It doesn't have to be perfect. I wanted to learn from this. I wanted to make this video. I wanted to, you know, make these coasters. And given that this actually came from the Delaware Water Gap, where I do spend a lot of time, I have a lot of great memories there. You know, it's almost going to be like an homage to Delaware Water Gap that I'm going to have at my house. I'm going to always think about it when I look at these coasters, when I use them. So, having said all that, let's talk about the bloopers. So first things first, I did mention this earlier, but the areas that were glued, as you can see here, came out lighter. So clearly either I didn't sand it enough or the glue simply just clogged the pores of the wood and it wasn't able to absorb the finish as well as the other areas. So you do see some splotches on all sides of all of them where there was some glue. Second thing, I wanted to retain the cedar smell because I really like the smell and I think it would, you know, give the room maybe a little bit of a smell. However, because of the finish, the Danish oil, it has a very like it's the same smell like from any, I guess, oil finish. So it smells similar to how my deck smelled when I redid it. How any wood that I've worked with in terms of polyurethane. So I think that smell may air out, but you know, just trying to sniff it like this, obviously I only get that, you know, that sort of oil, chemically smell, whatever it is. But at the same time, I'm not going to be sitting here and smelling these things. Maybe once or twice. You know, the point of it is to be a coaster, and I think it does that job wonderfully. I'm very happy that, you know, it actually is in the shape of a log, right? It has that sort of live edge effect. You see where a couple of the branches were, and because I have such a small tolerance around this metal rod, it more or less stays in place regardless. You can move it around and whatnot, as long as you get, you know, the pieces in order, which I think adds a little bit of charm to the piece because it gives you an opportunity to make it almost like a puzzle. So whether by yourself or if you have guests over, you know, you say, hey, try to put this together. And I think that's a cool thing about it. I think this was a cool project. I'm glad that I took this on when we were leaving the campsite. The last thing I loaded onto the boat was this log. And, you know, part of me thought, hey, like, what am I doing? Like, let me just leave this here. I don't have time for this. But I'm glad I took it. I'm glad I took the time to actually put these together. So I'm going to keep one set for myself. I'm going to give another set to my friends that we actually went on the trip with. So they'll also have a lot of memories tied to, you know, this particular piece or these particular pieces. So overall, I just want to say, you know, don't be afraid to take a chance, try something new, get out of your comfort zone. This wasn't a major, you know, undertaking by any means. This wasn't a major step out of my comfort zone by any means. However, it's a, you know, demonstration that if you have an idea in your head and you actually go ahead and do it rather than coming up with reasons of why not to do it or why you can't do it or you don't have the skills or the tools or whatnot, you know, don't think that way. Just go for it. It's definitely worth it, and you'll have something to remember. So this log has made quite a journey from this to this, and I feel like I've made a little bit of a journey myself. So get out there, start making stuff. Good luck.